The gavel cracks. A lie unravels in Judge Judy's court. The air in the television studio was cool, sterile, a stark contrast to the simmering heat of accusation about to fill the room. All eyes were fixed on the woman seated at the defendant's table, a woman named Penelope Kirchner, whose shifting gaze and nervous hands seemed to broadcast guilt long before she even uttered a word. Presiding over this arena of truth and consequence was the formidable Judge Judy, a woman whose reputation for slicing through deception was as sharp as the points on her judicial collar. The case seemed simple on its surface. A damaged limousine, a claim for repayment. But as the first question left Judge Judy's lips, a simple inquiry about a date, it became terrifyingly clear that this was not a story about a car accident. It was a high-stakes psychological thriller unfolding in real time. A masterclass in how a single, tangled web of lies can be systematically torn apart, thread by painful thread. Date of the accident? Judge Judy's voice was a laser, cutting through the formalities. Penelope Kirchner, a woman whose entire demeanor screamed of someone who had rehearsed a story but forgotten the most crucial lines, faltered immediately. "It was May 22nd, 21st, she stammered, her words tripping over each other in a desperate dash for coherence. Judge Judy's eyes, sharp and all-seeing, narrowed. 5:22, she stated, not asking, but defining. "Yeah, May." Penelope tried to continue, but she was already drowning in the quicksand of her own inconsistency. "Shh," Judge Judy commanded, the sound of verbal slap. "Where did it take place?" The question was repeated, a simple query about location that should have been the easiest part of the narrative, but for Penelope it became a mountain too high to climb. "He's saying," she began, attempting to deflect to look anywhere but inward for the answer. The sound of Judge Judy's hand rapping sharply on the desk echoed like a gunshot in the tense room. "Listen to me," she said, her tone low and dangerously calm. "Don't think of where you're going. Just tell me the truth and then we won't have a problem. Do you understand?" It was a warning, a clear and direct line drawn in the sand. "Yes, ma'am," Penelope whispered, but the fear in her eyes suggested she understood all too well that the problem had already begun. With the reluctant promise of truth hanging in the air, Penelope Kirchner finally spat out a location. Los Angeles. The city's name, vast and nonspecific, did nothing to satisfy the judge. "Los Angeles," Judge Judy repeated, her inflection turning the City of Angels into a suspect itself. "Yes," Penelope affirmed, though her voice lacked any conviction. "What were you doing?" the judge pressed, moving the story forward. "Driving for Francis," came the reply, a mention of the plaintiff, a man named Francis Bradley, who sat watching her with a mix of frustration and grim satisfaction. But this simple statement of employment was the kindling for a new fire. "Oh," Judge Judy exhaled, a sound laden with profound disbelief. Her hand rapped the desk once more, a percussive accent to her growing suspicion. "I'm not believing you. I want to tell you I'm not believing you." The directness was brutal, a public evisceration of credibility. The audience held its collective breath. This was no longer a dry, small claims case. It was a duel, and Penelope's weapon, her word, had just been declared useless. "Tell me the client that was in the car when you were driving for him that you had the accident in." The demand was specific, a trap designed for a liar. And Penelope Kirchner walked right into it. "Oh," she uttered, a perfect mirror of the judge's earlier sound. But where the judge's had been power, Penelope's was pure, unadulterated panic. That single, choked syllable told everyone in the room everything they needed to know. The story was about to change. It wasn't an accident, actually," she backtracked, her narrative swerving as wildly as the limousine she claimed to have controlled so masterfully. The carefully constructed facade of a simple fender bender was crumbling, and beneath it was something far more messy and convoluted. Judge Judy pounced on the contradiction. "Well, what was it?" The question was a spotlight, pinning Penelope in its blinding glare. What followed was a torrent of excuses, a word vomit of justification about getting lost, trying to find a party at a restaurant, the difficulty of turning a large car around in Los Angeles. Each sentence was another shovelful of dirt, digging the hole of her credibility deeper. "You know, I don't believe a word that you're saying to me," Judge Judy interjected, her voice flat and final. "I actually don't believe a word that you're saying to me, just the look." She gestured toward Penelope, whose face was a canvas of guilty tells. Just the look. It was a devastating assessment, one based not on evidence yet, but on the raw, human instinct of a woman who had seen 1,000 guilty faces and could recognize the pattern in an instant. Judge Judy, with the patience of a predator, began to reconstruct the story Penelope was so desperately trying to tell. "So, you couldn't find the party," she began, leading the witness. "I had to turn the car around," Penelope interrupted, clinging to her feeble defense. "Just a second." The judge silenced her, reclaiming control of the narrative. "You couldn't find the party, but you finally found the party." "Yes, thank God," Penelope replied, as if divine intervention was part of her legal argument. "But after you had had an accident with the car," Judge Judy finished, her tone leaving no room for ambiguity. "That's either a yes or a no." Cornered, Penelope surrendered a quiet yes. The admission seemed to hang in the air. Yeah, it's so easy," Judge Judy remarked, a note of contempt in her voice for the unnecessary struggle. But Penelope, like a drowning woman grasping at straws, immediately tried to take it back. "It's actually no, because it wasn't an accident." The whiplash of her testimony was dizzying. "Well, you hit something," the judge stated, refusing to be drawn into semantic games. What followed was a bizarre description of a driveway, a marker, and the tight maneuvering of a limousine. A story that ended with the audacious claim, "I don't even think I even hit anything. When I dropped the car off that night at the shop, there was no marks on the car. It was a bridge too far." Judge Judy had heard enough. She turned her attention to the core of Penelope's failing character. "Ms. Kirchner," she began, and the use of the formal name was a sentence in itself. "I was not actually inclined to view the plaintiff's claim favorably." This was a bombshell. For a moment, it seemed Francis Bradley might have been the one on trial. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. "But I find you so untrustworthy in your answers to me because he's going to be able to tell me. And he has a witness who's going to tell me that you knew that there was damage to the car, that you apologized for the damage to the car." This was no longer about the car. It was about the cover-up. It was about the lie. The timeline, a seemingly minor detail, became the next battlefield. When did she return the car? Penelope insisted it was the same night, Saturday the 21st. But then Francis Bradley, the plaintiff, spoke up, his voice firm and clear, dismantling her entire timeline. "Your Honor, no, it's incorrect." He revealed a far more damning story. Penelope Kirchner had not just borrowed the car for a single night. She had taken it on May 13th and had not returned it for over a week, despite his frantic calls asking, "Where's my car?" The case had just exploded. Judge Judy turned back to Penelope, her questions now rapid fire, a verbal blitzkrieg designed to expose the truth. "Did you keep his car on the 13th? 14th? Just answer my question." "No, Your Honor," Penelope insisted. But the no was weak, a leaf shaking in a hurricane. "We're under oath," someone reminded her, the words echoing the gravity of the moment. "No, I am under oath, and no," Penelope repeated, but the denial was now pathetic, a child's lie in the face of overwhelming adult logic. The judge moved back to the little fender thing, the original point of contention, but it was almost an afterthought now. The real crime was the theft of time, the breach of trust, and the spectacular tapestry of falsehoods woven to hide it all. Then, the final blow was introduced. Judge Judy gestured to a man sitting near Francis. "Who is this?" she asked. Francis answered, "This is my witness that looked at the car." A small, knowing chuckle escaped him. He had brought a soldier to this battle, and that soldier was about to testify to the damage Penelope claimed never existed. Judge Judy looked from the confident plaintiff and his prepared witness back to the crumbling defendant. "She's not doing well," the judge observed, a clinical assessment of a patient dying of self-inflicted wounds. "No, she's not," Francis agreed, the understatement of the century. And then Judge Judy asked Penelope the most terrifying, Question of the day. A question that went straight to the heart of every liar's fear. Do you understand that? That she's not doing well? The she was Penelope herself, spoken about in the third person, as if her identity was already being stripped away by the force of her own deceit. Yes, ma'am, I do, Penelope mumbled, a final, full admission of her own catastrophic failure. Do you know what that says to me when somebody's not doing well? Judge Judy asked, and in that question was the summation of her entire judicial philosophy. It said that the truth has a weight, a substance that a lie can never mimic. It said that the human conscience, when burdened with deception, eventually buckles and breaks under the pressure. And its collapse is visible for all to see. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. The lesson was clear before the judgment was even uttered. Judge Judy's final instruction to the defeated woman was simple, symbolic, and devastating. I would say that you should sit right where you are. And Penelope Kirchner, exposed, humiliated, and utterly defeated, had no choice but to obey, trapped in the witness box of her own making. The real accident was not the scrape on a limousine's fender. It was the moment she decided that a lie was easier than the truth, a miscalculation that led to a very public and very final crash. Lesson for the listeners and viewers. The story of Frances Bradley and Penelope Kirchner is a powerful and stark reminder that while a lie might seem like a convenient shortcut in the moment, it is always a detour that leads to a dead end of lost credibility and personal shame. The truth has a singular, unshakable power. It is consistent, it is simple, and it does not require a perfect memory to be told. A lie, however, is a fragile house of cards, a complex story that must be constantly maintained and defended. And as Penelope learned under the unwavering gaze of Judge Judy, the slightest breath of scrutiny can bring the entire fragile structure crashing down. In the court of law and in the court of life, your integrity is your most valuable asset. Once you sacrifice it, you are left with nothing to stand on.